Today I am going to introduce a module on communication. The main objectives of this module are to understand definition of communication, nature of communication, and types of communication. The word communication is derived from the Latin communis, which means common. It refers to a natural activity of all humans, which is to convey opinions, feelings, information, and ideas to others through words, written or spoken, body language or signs. We communicate through words, facial expressions, signs, bodily gestures, and touch. Why do people communicate? Humans communicate to relate and exchange ideas, knowledge, feelings, and experiences, and for many other interpersonal and social purposes. Now, let us look at one of the popular definitions of communication. Keith Davis defines communication as the transfer of information and understanding from one person to another person. It is a way of reaching others with facts, ideas, thoughts, and values. It is a bridge of meaning among people so that they can share what they feel and know. By using this bridge, a person can cross safely the river of misunderstanding that sometimes separates people. Now, let us try to understand the process of communication. The process of communication refers to the transmission or passage of information or message from the sender through a selected channel to the receiver. The process of communication is a cyclic one, as it begins with the sender and ends with the sender in the form of feedback. The different elements in the process of communication are sender. Sender is the person who transmits or sends the message, which may be a thought, an idea, a picture, a symbol, a report, or an order, and postures and gestures, even a momentary smile. Message, referred to as the information conveyed by words as in speech and write-ups, signs, pictures, or symbols, depending upon the situation and the nature and importance of information desired to be sent. Message is the heart of communication. It is the content the sender wants to convey to the receiver. It can be verbal, both written and spoken, or non-verbal, that is pictorial or symbolic. Encoding. Encoding is putting the targeted message into appropriate medium, which may be verbal or non-verbal depending upon the situation, time, space, and nature of the message to be sent. The sender puts the message into a series of symbols, pictures, or words which will be communicated to the intended receiver. Channel. Channel refers to the way or mode the message flows or is transmitted through. The message is transmitted over a channel that links the sender with the receiver. The message may be oral or written, and it may be transmitted through a memorandum, a computer, telephone, cell phone, apps, or televisions. Receiver. Receiver is the person or group who the message is meant for. He may be a listener, a reader, or a viewer. The receiver needs to comprehend the message sent in the best possible manner such that the true intent of the communication is attained. The extent to which the receiver decodes the message depends on his or her knowledge of the subject matter of the message, experience, trust, and relationship with the sender. Decoding. Decoding refers to interpreting or converting the sent message into intelligible language. It simply means comprehending the message. The receiver, after receiving the message, interprets it and tries to understand it in the best possible manner. Feedback refers to the response of the receiver as to the message sent to him or her by the sender. Feedback is necessary to ensure that the message has been effectively encoded, sent, decoded, and comprehended. It is the final step of the communication process and establishes that the receiver has received the message in its letter and spirit. Now, let us move to the next section, which is types of communication. There are different forms of communication which fulfill different purposes. Let us discuss about the various ways in which we communicate with each other. Communication can be classified in various ways. Based on the medium employed, it can be classified into verbal communication. Verbal communication can be further classified into face-to-face communication and oral communication, and 2. Non-verbal communication. Based on the number of persons who receive the message, communication can be classified into 1. Intrapersonal communication, 2. Interpersonal communication, 3. Group communication, 4. Mass communication. Based on the parties involved, communication can be classified into internal communication, which is again further classified into vertical communication. Vertical communication has upward communication and downward communication. Then B. Horizontal or lateral communication, and C. Diagonal or cross communication, and 2. External communication. Based on formality, communication can be classified into formal communication and informal communication. Other forms of communication include written communication and visual communication. First, based on the medium employed. The first and the most commonly used type of communication is the verbal communication, which involves exchange of information through spoken words. A person using verbal communication chooses to convey information to others through verbal dialogue, speech, discussion, or presentation. Verbal communication serves as a vehicle for expressing desires, ideas, and concepts, and is vital to the process of teaching and learning. The most advantageous aspect of the verbal communication is that the sender can receive an immediate feedback, thereby enabling the sender to clarify any gaps or missing information with the receiver without having to wait. This feature of verbal communication makes it appealing, and it is also the reason why most people choose this form of communication to have interpersonal discussions. The content which is shared is of utmost importance in verbal communication. The choice of words and the language used to communicate play a vital role in transmitting the message to the receiver successfully. Using verbal communication also involves paying attention to certain language rules for grammar and syntax to ensure smooth flow and accurate construction of the message being communicated. For example, if a person says, "I go to their have," the choice of words is right. However, grammatically it will not make sense. The right sequence is, "I have to go there," will enable the message to be clear. Then there are contextual rules also which become important in verbal communication. Words can be perceived using denotative meanings or connotative meanings. Denotative meanings are what we find in the dictionary, the standard meanings given to words, whereas connotative meanings are given by us based on our experiences and beliefs. For example, when a boy says his friend is cool, he means that he is friendly and modern, whereas the dictionary meaning may be referring to the temperature. Lastly, listening also plays a major role in verbal communication. Active listening by the receiver and the sender will enable verbal communication to be effective. Verbal communication can be broadly classified into two types: face-to-face communication and oral communication. Let's understand these further. Face-to-face communication involves exchange of information between people directly by being physically present with each other. Face-to-face communication is the most preferred and one of the best types of communication to ensure error-free and smooth flow of information. However, it also requires time and effort from both the sender and receiver to successfully meet at a common place and enable the process of communication. Moreover, the need to physically meet has reduced in the modern times with the enhancement of technology that enables video calling facilities, which almost creates that real-time experience for both the sender and receivers of the communication process. In face-to-face communication, role of non-verbal communication is equally important as the verbal communication. Now let us see oral communication. Oral communication is the communication that takes place between people where they are able to listen to each other without having to meet face to face. Oral communication can be either formal or informal. Oral communication is possible through phones, radios, recorded speech, etc. Examples of oral communication include face-to-face conversations, telephone conversations, discussions that take place at business meetings, commencement speeches given at a graduation ceremony, and so on. Oral communication may be a one-way communication or a two-way communication. Oral communication is when the sender sends the message to the receiver but may not receive a feedback. Two-way communication involves both the sender and receiver to participate in exchanging information. In oral communication, content is extremely important as the receiver is completely dependent on message he or she listens to. Sender should make sure that the distractions in the environment are minimized so that the audio message is clear, and the receiver needs to ensure that he or she is psychologically attending to the message. Other aspects such as voice clarity, speech deficits, tone, pitch, accent, dialect, and prosody also affect the oral communication. Modern forms of oral communication include podcasts, audio clips that you can access on the internet, and voice over internet protocol, which allows callers to communicate over the internet and avoid telephone charges. The second type of communication is the non-verbal communication. Non-verbal communication include facial expressions, the tone and pitch of the voice, gestures displayed through body language, also known as kinesics, and the physical distance between the communicators, also known as proxemics. These non-verbal signals can give clues and additional information and meaning over and above spoken or verbal communication. According to Knapp and Hall, non-verbal communication plays 6 roles. 1. Repetition, that is, it helps us emphasize the message repeatedly when it is accompanied with a verbal message. 2. Contradiction. Non-verbal behavior clearly depicts when a person is verbally saying something, yet he is feeling something different about it. 3. Substitution. Sometimes people use non-verbal communication as a replacement to verbal communication. However, this may be a practice that may prove effective at times when the relationship with the person, context, and importance of the message are clear. 4. Complementing. Non-verbal behavior can very well complement a verbal statement. For example, if you want to say thank you to your friend for the help he or she did, you can always say thank you by shaking hands, giving a hug, or just with a beautiful smile on your face. 5. Accenting. When a person wants to convey a message effectively and stress clearly on some parts of the message, he or she may choose to use nonverbals to differentiate the importance of different parts of the message to be communicated. And lastly, regulation. Nonverbal behavior can be very helpful in regulating the flow of information. For example, a counselor may use his body language by leaning forward to encourage the clients to speak more, and he may choose to lean backward when he wants to pitch in. Then, According to 𝗬𝗎-𝗏, there are 7 types of nonverbal communication. 1. Kinesics. Kinesics include all the body movements of the person. It involves hand movements, leg movements, facial expressions, gestures, eye movements, and all the other body movements. The next category of nonverbals in kinesics are head movements and posture. We use head nods to communicate yes or no to the receiver and whether we have been following what was being communicated. According to 𝗧𝗧, there are 4 general human postures: standing, sitting, squatting, and lying down. And the variations in each convey different information. For example, a person standing with the hands on his hip may come across like a person with confidence and power. Sitting posture may convey different things. For example, if you sit erect and lean forward, it shows you are open to the conversation, and if you are slouched, it may show your disinterest. Eye contact of a person is the 3rd category of kinesics. Eye contact can convey a lot about the person, and in fact, it is said that eyes are the window to the soul. Eye contact may indicate expressions of feeling, willingness to engage in interpersonal exchange, or a desire to continue or to stop talking. Lack of eye contact or looking away may convey withdrawal, embarrassment, or discomfort. Having sharp and constant eye contact is also unhelpful, as it can be misinterpreted as rude, and having inconsistent and low eye contact is also detrimental while having a conversation. Having an adequate level of eye contact is extremely important in the process of communication and in building a working relationship. Facial expressions. Facial expressions is an important factor in kinesics. Some of the examples of facial expressions include rolling eyes, raising brows, tightening lips, rolling tongue inside the mouth, biting lips, smacking lips, nose movements, etc. All of these expressions convey different meanings about the person's internal states. Facial expressions help us understand the emotion that is expressed by another person. Paralinguistics or vocalics. Paralinguistics include the voice cues such as tone of voice, pitch, volume, voice, quality, rate of speech, and fluency of speech. This also includes the pauses and silences in the communication. Pitch can be used to regulate the flow of communication, increase the intensity of the message, or reduce the intensity. Different situations call for different variations in paralinguistics, which makes the whole process complex and diverse. Sarcasm is usually used to convey using a different tone of voice, and somebody having poor social skills or deficit in the brain areas responsible to interpret paralinguistics will not be able to understand the underlying meaning of what is being conveyed, and they will only perceive the verbal message for its face value. Speech rate, fluency can also tell us about the state of mind the person is having at the current moment. For example, when people are anxious, they tend to speak very fast. Haptics or touch. Haptics refer to understanding the role of touch in communication. According to Heslin and Appler, there are several types of touch, including functional professional, social polite, friendship warmth, love intimacy, and sexual arousal touch. For example, a handshake can convey many things, whether the handshake is firm, loose, comfortable, uncomfortable, and so on. Cultural norms also affect use and interpretation of touch behaviors. Lack of knowledge about haptics can cause serious interpersonal consequences. Now, Based on parties involved, communication is of two types, internal and external. Let us discuss about each of these in detail. Internal communication. Internal communication involves communication between members within the organization. Internal communication involves sharing information pertaining to the company norms, policies, procedures, decisions and practices with an aim to keep the members of the organization updated. Internal communication is extremely important in building cohesion among members in achieving organizational goals. Members at several levels of the hierarchy have their own unique role to make this transmission successful. The quality of internal communication within the organization is one of the crucial factors in portraying the organization as one team to the outside world. Internal communication is of three types, and they are vertical, horizontal and diagonal or cross. Vertical communication. Vertical communication is the communication that takes place across different levels of hierarchy. For example, a manager communicating to his subordinate or a manager reporting to his CEO. Vertical communication can be of two types, upward and downward communication. Upward communication is when the information gets transmitted from the lower rung of the hierarchy to the upper level. For example, when the subordinate reports to the manager, it is an upward communication. Conversely, downward communication is when the manager communicates with his or her subordinate to get the work done. Horizontal or lateral communication. Horizontal or lateral communication is when the communication takes place between the people of the same hierarchical level. For example, when the manager of one team discusses with manager of another team. Diagonal or cross communication. Diagonal or cross communication is the communication which takes place between people across teams and levels in the organization. For example, manager of product team discusses ideas with employees in design team. External communication. External communication is the communication that takes place between members of the organization and members of external agencies, business clients, other organizations or any outsiders. Therefore, it can involve a business to business communication or a business to customer communication or both. Usually, external communication helps in strengthening the ties or network with others in the society. External communication becomes inevitable when the work gets outsourced to other organization. External communication includes the press releases, advertisements, digital marketing spaces and customer communication. External communication needs to be done in the right way as it reflects the company's reputation and image to the outside world. Now, based on formality, communication is divided into two types, formal and informal. Formal communication is the communication which takes place in organizations and institutions and is bound by certain norms and guidelines set by organizations. Formal communication follows the chain of command and the flow is regulated in several ways. Formal communication is conventional, systematic and structured. However, at times it can be time-taking and rigid also. Informal communication is the communication which takes place between employees in the organization without any formal rules or regulations. The common term used for informal communication in organizations is grapevine communication. Informal communication includes the regular catch-up discussions by peers, gossiping, small talks, sharing personal issues, etc. Informal communication can be very helpful if it takes place in healthy and supportive manner. However, it may pose threat to the company if it involves gossiping and other unhealthy ways which creates the divide between the employees themselves or with the company. So, to sum up then, in today's lesson we have understood about definition of communication, process of communication, basic functions of communication, characteristics of communication, purposes of communication, and different forms of communication in great detail.